You're watching the Using Technology Better Show.
Practical tech tips for teachers.
Hello there and welcome back to the Using Technology Better Show. I'm Samantha Garrett and joining me today from across Australia and New Zealand are my colleagues Adrian, Paul, Donna and Lara. Welcome everyone, great to see you all.
Hey Sam.
Kia ora everyone.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
So we all enjoyed some time off over the holiday period and we hope that you did too. But now we are back at it and gearing up for a big year. And down here in the Southern Hemisphere, January is back to school month. So we're pretty sure that all of you watching want a really smooth start to the school year. We also know that one of the things that can cause havoc in the classroom at the start of the year is technology, or more so when you put your students and the technology together. Team, do you have any havoc stories from your classroom days with technology?
I do, Sam. It's just, that start of the year, the kids can never find their files, they can't find their work, they have all these excuses, they can't do their work, they don't know where it is, just chaos. But we've got some help for you today.
My best one is I walked into my classroom ready to go and the Wi-Fi didn't work, so I thought, oh, it's okay, I'll just quickly plug my laptop in and just use the projector, and all the projectors had been removed because they were servicing them.
Oh, that's really frustrating, Adrian. One of my biggest issues was when we had a really good session, all the students were on their tech and creating great stuff. Then when it came to share what the students were doing on their tech, it got really frustrating having to airdrop or distribute files or kind of share what the students were actually doing on their device.
Yeah, one thing I've always found quite challenging at the start of the year, I used to teach year 7, so that was their first year in a school, and it was setting up passwords and usernames and helping them to remember them and typing the big long end of their domain with their school on as well.
Thanks team for sharing those stories. And I'm pretty sure that most of our viewers are going to have similar experiences. That's why today in our back to school edition, we want to bring you our favourite back to school tech tips to make sure that you can have that smooth start, avoid the havoc and avoid the stress that comes with it. So back over to you team, who wants to kick things off?
I will, Sam, seeing as I mentioned it in my tip havoc at the beginning. So as I said, one of the things that is really, I found really frustrating at the start of the year is kids could never find their files, and often throughout the year they could never find their files. So one of the things that we did was actually deliberately teach kids how to file their work right from the start. So making sure that they were in the folder where they needed the file to live before they created it was a really important tip that we did right from day one. I don't know, team, what did you do about things like that?
Absolutely, and I think sometimes if you've got a class who haven't had that taught to them the years before, they might have a whole bunch of stuff just sitting in their drive too that's not named and they don't know if they need it. So I like to create an archive folder in Drive or in OneDrive, wherever it is, and shovel that stuff that you don't want to deal with in there so it's not being deleted. You can find it later if you need it, but it saves you having to go through file by file. So sort of tidying up before you start your new practices that you've talked about, Donna.
That's a great idea, Lara. Yeah. Yep. One of the things that I am always aware of too is with devices like tablets and iPads, there's actually a files app. Some people don't realize that you can actually name your different files and store them in folders on an iPad. So that's something that when the students come into my classroom, I try and teach them as well.
So Donna, did you do this every year, or did you just kind of do it as a one-off and then hope that it would stick? What would you
ideally, Adrian, good point, because ideally that it's something that you wouldn't need to do every year if it was done consistently throughout your school. So it's something that we work with our teachers as well, is best practice across our team, so that as a teaching team, we were all doing the same practices. So the following year, it wasn't so chaotic for students. And what we also looked at was, I don't know about you guys, but I taught 9 and 10-year-olds, and they would love to use big text and pretty coloured fonts and massive margins. So they would feel like they'd filled up their page and therefore they'd done lots of work. So we also taught them to set up their page size at the start of the year, and we taught them to set their margins and their default font size so that every file they created going forward, everybody was standard, and we had that consistent idea of actually what amounts of work look like. So we've got a great little video tip to show you how to do that as well. Let's take a look at how we can set up default page and margin sizes. So we talked about being in the folder where we want the file to live. So I'm going to come into my 2021 folder. Here's the archive folder that Lara was talking about to keep everything nice and clean from previous work. So I'm going to go into this folder. I want it to live in the demo folder, and this is where I'm going to create the document. So I just click on Doc and create it. Now we talked about setting up default page size and margin size. So we click on File, we come down to Page Setup, and this is what we need to check. Quite often this is set at letter, so just make sure this is A4, and let's make our margins 0.5, which is quite a nice size if you're thinking that in the future you might want to print something. Now that we've changed them, you can see our Set as Default button is live, so we click on this. Now every document that we create going forward will be A4. It will be portrait, so we could switch to landscape here if we needed, but they will always have these margin sizes. Click on OK. Now to set our default font, we come up here and I want my default font to be Poppins. So I'm going to click on Poppins and I want my size to be 11. So then I can come to normal text, come down here to options and save as my default styles. So now every document that we create going forward is going to be set up with those page sizes, and our font and size is going to be set. So there we go, a good tip to get your students sorted at the beginning of the year. And of course, don't forget, make sure they name their document. Good luck for the year going forward.
That's really helpful, Donna. Thanks for sharing that. Now, Adrian, do you have any advice that you want to add?
Oh look, I taught senior kids, so that was really those 17, 18-year-old kids, and I would have to, that's what I kind of asked before, because I would have to teach them every year how to do stuff over and over again, and I used a lot of video in my class, and what I found was that kids would not necessarily watch video for learning, but they watch it for entertainment. So I actually had to teach my kids how to watch a video so they would get information out of it that they could then use for their learning. So we did it as a big class. We'd then write down some notes what we learned. Then I broke them into groups. Same deal, set it for homework. They'd then watch another video. And then at the end, I would kind of bring them back in the next day and we'd just chat to see how it's all going. And it took a bit of time to do that. And I also created some tick lists and stuff like that, which I wanted people to do and follow through as well.
It's all about those routines, isn't it? It's like, I think as teachers, particularly in primary, you can spend a lot of time at the start of the year setting up your classroom routines and your expectations around how we operate in this class and where things live in the class. And that just has to extend to what we're doing in the digital world as well. So where our iPads are stored and how we look after them and where your files go. And if you can set those routines at the start of the year, you're going to have a much easier time. So it's just thinking in the same way you do with everything that's physical, bringing that to your digital things as well.
Yeah, so what I did, Lara, was I set up like a tick list of things to do, like a scavenger hunt. And then what I try to do is gamify it a little bit and just put in like a progress bar. So as they went through and ticked off everything, a progress bar would load. So if you want to have a look at that, I've created a little video. It goes for about exactly 1 minute and 1 second. And it shows you how to actually make a tick list with a whole lot of stuff in it and how that tick list can actually have a progress bar at the top to make it a little bit more fun and maybe entertaining for your students. So let's have a look at that now. When we go back to school, it's really good to have a tick list for the students to complete to make sure they're ready to roll for the first couple of weeks. So what I've got is just a checklist here. I've inserted checkboxes down here, and as I go along and the students go across, this progress bar fills up. So it kind of gamifies it to make it a little bit more exciting for the students. So how do we do that? To insert a checkbox, we just go insert checkbox, and that gives us a checkbox that we can add in. But the function to make this work is using a sparkline function. So it's just a little graph, and all it's doing is counting the number of items in this column here that are true, because when it's ticked, it's true, and then it's going to draw a bar chart for me, the max amount being the number of items in this bit here, and it's going to put a color of red there. So it's really cool. It makes it really interesting for the students, makes it a bit more of a game, really quick, really easy to set up, and you can put as many things in your tick list as you want. All you need to do is make sure that this last cell here it's the same as the last cell that you've got there. Give it a crack, see how you go.
Wow, Adrian, that is so cool. I really love that you can do that in a spreadsheet. You are definitely our team spreadsheet nerd, aren't you? Now, no pressure, Paul, but I wonder, do you have any tips to add to these?
Yeah, so basically building a little bit on from Adrian's point about setting expectations, one of the, I guess the pain points for me as a teacher was trying to share the wonderful work that my students were doing on their devices. And I guess in this remote learning environment that we've actually come out of as well, the ability for the teacher to record and video themselves with preparation for a lesson or a flipped learning. So one of the things that I found really beneficial to teach my kids, especially on an iPad, was the ability to screen record, because that allowed my students to just quickly swipe down from the control panel and actually record not only what they were doing on the screen, but also the thinking behind it. And so it kind of set those expectations and accountability that at the end of a lesson together, we could call on the students to actually, I guess, replay their thinking and their thoughts around a session that we've had. I'd be interested to know, on iPad, obviously, turning the screen recorder on the control panel is really powerful. Are there other ways on other platforms that we can actually record screens? What are your tips, guys?
Yeah, definitely, Paul, on Chromebooks and laptops, or anyone who's using Google Workspace or G Suite or whatever it's being referred to at the moment in your workplace, is Screencastify. The screen Chrome extension that's free, super easy for students, same thing, to record their screen, but also to record their thinking. So important.
And just to add to that, Donna, I love Screencastify because it saves my recordings directly to my Google Drive and I can share them so easily. Paul, do you have any tips for if you're creating them on an iPad, like where would you then store those files for your students to access when they need it?
Yeah, that's a really great point, and it kind of builds on Donna's point at the start of the show. Was I like to, obviously by default, those recordings go straight to my photo gallery or my camera roll. I like to transfer them and move them straight to that filing system in the Files app, because that allows my students to find and search for those files really, really quickly. And it also allows us to name those recordings, which I think are super important going forward.
Totally.
So I've actually made a video, a little bit like Donna and a little bit like
Fantastic.
Adrian. I've made a video to show you how to turn on that screen recorder in the control panel on your iPad. And there's a little tip that I want you to watch out for, and that is to turn on the microphone, because without the microphone, we don't get that beautiful student narration through. So this is how you do it.
So one of the best ways to make learning and thinking more visible is to turn on our screen recorder on our iPad. That will allow us to record any app that we're in and also the narration, so the students can narrate over the top. So how do we do that? Well, if we go up to the top right-hand corner of our iPad and drag our finger down, you'll notice that we can see our control panel. And our control panel is a really quick way to access different tools on our iPad. And you can see right down the bottom, my screen recorder is actually on and actually working. But how do we get it into our control panel? Because sometimes we don't have it in there and our students are looking for it. So it's really, really easy. We go down to our settings app, and then we go to the control center settings down the left-hand side of our menu. Now you can see the top ones are all the ones that I've actually added to my control panel, and the ones underneath it are the ones that are not there. So if your screen recorder, which is this bottom one here, is actually in the bottom where the more controls, all you need to do is press plus, and that will allow it to actually be in your control panel. So please, at the start of every year, if your students are using iPads, get them to turn on their screen recorder so you can access it in your control panel. So when I swipe from the top right-hand corner, you can see that it's in there now. A little tip from me, make sure that you press down on the record button for a second or two, a long press, and make sure that your microphone is on, because by default, it's not turned on. So whatever the student records, they're not going to get that beautiful narration over the top. So that's a quick tip on how to actually turn on your screen recorder in your control panel.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, team. That was an awesome discussion. I love hearing all of your little tips and tricks. And I really hope that everyone watching did as well. And we hope that these help you have a really smooth start to the school year and avoid that havoc and avoid the stress that comes with it. Now, if you want to recap any of the stuff you've seen, we'll pop all the links to the resources and that in the show notes below. And if you want to keep up the smooth sailing for the rest of the school year, then we have a whole lot of on-demand courses on Google, Apple, and Microsoft tools that can really help you take your tech game to the next level. So that's it for the show today. Also check out those show notes as well for those links to those courses that I just mentioned. But yeah, that's it from us. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much, team, and we'll see you again here soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks, Sam.